right, good morning. We're so glad you're here today. What a great fall day in the city of Pittsburgh. It's just beautiful out. And wherever you are, we're one church in 6 locations. Let me just say, we're so glad you've joined us. My name is Jeff Leake. I'm the lead pastor, and I want to do my best over the next few minutes to add some value into your life as we go through this message together. But we just want to greet you. So if you're at Ohio River, you're at Mount Nebo, you're at the Butler campus, Deer Lakes, Northside, watching online, wherever you happen to be, we're just glad you've joined us for today's service. And why don't you just, this is a little team spirit moment. Pittsburgh Steelers are playing today. Why don't you just turn to your neighbor and say, "Go Duck Hodges." Just say, you're like, who in the world are you talking about? He's our quarterback now. You didn't know that? Come on. 3rd string, he's going to play tonight. Go Duck Hodges. It's going to be awesome. All right. Yeah, so we're going to continue in the series we started a couple of weeks ago called Floors and Ceilings, and this is a combination series. It's also life group studies. I've done some teaching by video, so we have, I think almost 100 life groups around the region that are studying as well during the week, what we're also studying on the weekends, and so this maximizes the learning. We're calling this series Floors and Ceilings because there are some things in life that become like a ceiling to you, and until you learn how to overcome it, it's like a stopper. And so we're believing God's going to take us to another level in our lives. And there's a very relevant topic we're going to talk about today that can be a stopper for a lot of us. So I'll begin like this. One of the first moments that I remember dealing with this particular issue in my life was when I was getting ready to go into middle school for the first time. So in Monroeville, Pennsylvania, going to Monroeville Junior High, the next day was my first day. And it stressed me out. I was so worried about what middle school would be like, because a couple of things. First, I'd never ridden the bus before, because in elementary school, I was what they called a walker. Anybody remember walkers? I lived close enough to the elementary school that I walked to school. Now I had to ride the bus. That was new. And then, you change classes in middle school. We didn't do that in elementary school. And then, the thing I worried about the most was I was joining the orchestra because I was playing the trumpet. Not well, but I was playing the trumpet. And so I had my trumpet I had to bring to school on the bus, and I was thinking the whole time, will it fit in my locker? What am I going to do with this trumpet? What if people make fun of me? And I stayed up until 4 o'clock in the morning, worried about the next day of middle school, stressing out. Now, I survived. Here I am, right? Isn't it amazing that the things that you worry about today, 5 years from now, you probably won't be thinking about? But at the moment that you're in, it's everything. What you're worried about right now is just everything. Okay, so we're talking about this issue today of stress. How we respond to stress can be like a stopper in our life. It's not just the things that are happening around you. It's actually the things that are happening in you that becomes a stopper for you. And let me just give you some stats. In case you weren't encouraged enough by this topic, let me just tell you how bad it is, all right? So 44% of Americans feel more stressed today than they did 5 years ago, right? And it's funny, in the 1950s and 60s, there were some futurists predicted that because of the advances of technology, what we in 2019 would be most worried about is how to spend all our leisure time. That's actually not what happened, is it? With the advancement of technology, how many of you discovered that this thing actually is a source of stress? I think I heard a stat that we check it every 52 seconds. How about that? So now you have to resist the temptation throughout the service not to pull it out, right? And so here's the deal. Like this, so we know more than we used to know. We know more about a lot of things. That the 24-hour news cycle is constantly telling us all the problems in the world, let alone in our own life, right? And then we look on Instagram and we can compare ourselves with other people who seem like they're doing better by their pictures. Right? And so that adds stress. So there's just all kinds of things that compile with the advancement of technology. Okay. 1 in 5 Americans experience extreme stress, heart palpitations, shaking, depression. Stress, listen, is the basic cause of 60% of illnesses and disease. Stress-related issues are a part of 60% of visits to the doctor. This is according to the American Institute of Stress. And it says it increases the risk of heart disease by 40%, heart attack by 25%, and stroke by 50%. This one I have to say ouch to. 40% of stressed out people eat or overeat unhealthy foods. Yeah. 44% lose sleep every night. Extreme stress shrinks the brain. in case you didn't have enough problems, right? By reducing gray matter in regions tied to emotional and physiological function. This is an issue. This is a big issue. It can affect your health. It can affect your spiritual life. It can affect your relationships. Not knowing how to process stress is a big thing in our culture. So I know this is a relevant topic. We all process this. And again, it's not just that it's stuff that happens to us. You say, well, I'm stressed out, Pastor, because there's so many things going on in my life right now, and I can't stop all that. No, I get that. There are things that are stressors, but there's something different, and that's when our soul begins to respond internally to the stress in a way that chokes off the flow of God's grace. I liken it like this. There's a story in the Old Testament, in the Jewish scriptures, of David's mighty men. And David was not just a great warrior who defeated Goliath. He had men around him who rose up to do great exploits. And there was the top 30 that they actually called by that name, the 30. When the 30 walked in, these were the 30 greatest warriors of David's kingdom in Israel. And then above the 30, there was a group called the 3. And one of the 3 was a guy named Eleazar. And Eleazar, in the middle, he got his fame because in the middle of a battle, when they were fighting against the Philistines, the rest of the Israelites ran because they thought they were going to be defeated. And there was this key piece of ground that Eleazar knew they needed to hold. And so he stood all by himself. Now, it was different warfare back then. There were no tanks or airplanes or guns. They fought with sword and spear. But this guy was such a warrior that he fought off the Philistine army all by himself and defended that ground. And they came wave after wave. And he fought and he fought and he fought. And they came. And once he thought maybe he'd gotten them stopped. And then another wave came and another wave came. And finally, when they came to his aid, they discovered that his hand had frozen to the sword, meaning that he had fought for so long and so hard that his hand was cramped and had to be peeled off one finger at a time from the sword because he had fought for so long. Sometimes your soul under stress feels like that. Like the problems just keep coming. And you thought it was over, and then more, and this bill, and this problem, and this conflict, and this relational difficulty, and this thing at work. And then my son got an ear infection, and then I got this, I got to go to this over here, and this happening, and it's just constantly, right, one thing after the other. And before you know it, your soul feels a little bit like this. And so the stress on the inside of you has got you all tight inside, keeping you up at night. And so how am I supposed to deal with this? This is the question we want to address today. Now, the context for the series is based on 14 psalms, songs that were a part of the Jewish songbook, which we find right in the middle of the Old Testament. And they're Psalm 120 to 134. And they would sing them as a liturgy as they walked up the steps to the temple. So there was this hill they would walk up as they prepared to go meet with God. And they would sing these 14 psalms through. And each one of them has to deal with a problem that we face in life. And so as they're singing, they're processing, okay? And so we're studying what they were processing as they ascended to meet with God and as we ascend to another level. Now, we started at Psalm 120. Now we're in Psalm 127 today. And let's listen to what the psalmist writes here. By the way, the writer of this psalm is David's son, Solomon. It tells us that if you have a Bible and you look at the top, it not only says under Psalm 127, Psalms of Ascents, it says a song of Solomon. And so here's what it says. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Just kind of stop for a moment. We'll keep the verse on the screen. Here's basically what it says. There are some work that you do that no matter how long you work, what you're trying to accomplish can't be accomplished just by more effort. There is a limit to how much your work can work. Some things are so big, some problems are so immense, some challenges are so great that no matter how hard you work or how long you work, it's just not enough to get the project complete. And then it says, unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. They would have watchmen that would stand on the wall of this walled city in Jerusalem, and they would make sure the enemies were not coming to overtake them. And so basically it says, sometimes when you watch the thing you care about, you just can't concentrate it. Like, I know you're trying to protect your kids and your family and your finances and your future and the things, but your watchfulness has a limit to it. Because at some point, you run out of the ability to protect something and you need help from another source. And then the last part says, in vain you rise up early and stay up late. You're just kind of worrying yourself, you know? You're up at night, and that's the thing your mind is racing about, and you're just trying to figure it out. And we know that there's a limit to what our worry can accomplish. Actually, the New Testament, Jesus says that worry doesn't do anything for us. It doesn't add an ounce to our life, an hour to our life. It doesn't make anything better. It's just a fruitless activity. But I know we don't like to think of it as worry. We like to think of it as more like strategic analysis, right? we think, I'm not really worrying. I'm just kind of I'm just trying to think through, if I think it through one more time, maybe I'll come up with the answer to this problem. And so I guess we'll say it like this. There is also a limit to what your wisdom can accomplish. You can't work long enough. You can't watch long enough. You can't have enough wisdom to solve certain problems because you reach an end to yourself. And if you haven't yet arrived at this place where you realize that you have limits, then you end up trying to fix everything by yourself. And that's often where your soul gets all cramped up inside. And then it transitions. In vain you rise up early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he, God, grants sleep. Another word we could use here, rest. The Lord grants rest to those he loves. This is what we're after. God-given rest on the inside, the release of that tightness on the inside so that we can let it be in the hands of God. And when we are there, then he gives us the ability, even in the midst of all that's going on in our life, to have inner rest, which allows his grace to flow into our life, and it then takes us to another level in our spiritual walk. Okay, for the Lord grants rest to those that he loves. This is the acknowledgement of our limits, and it's the recognition of how much we need God's help. But the decision is ours as to whether or not we're going to trust with it or not. Now, I have a good friend of mine. His name is Scott Wilson. He's the pastor at the Oaks Fellowship in Texas, Dallas, Texas, and I've seen Scott do this illustration. He said he used to, because he had so much responsibility. He's got 4 sons, and he's pastoring this large church. And he said he would often get up in the morning and try to psych himself up for the day. And he would look himself in the mirror, and he'd put his fists up in the air like Rocky Balboa. Can you see the statue? All right. And he put his fist up there, and he would look at himself and he'd say, "You got this." And he said it wasn't too long into that journey of trying to motivate himself for the day that he realized that a lot of times he didn't got this. And so he said he started changing his daily routine. He would start like this, "You got this." And then he would say, "But you don't got this." And then he would turn his hands up like this, and he would say, "God, you got this." Okay? And that became the way for him to say, I can't handle it all on my own, God. I start the day knowing I need your help. Okay, isn't that a good illustration? Some of you might choose to start your day. Why don't we try it together? I'm not going to make you stand like it last week, but wherever you are at your campus, can you do the Rocky pose? Well, there you go. So say this, "I don't got this." Turn your hands up now, but God, you got this. All right, give somebody a high five next to you and say, "That was good. You look just like Rocky." Rocky 7 right there, baby. Come on. Awesome. All right. Now, here's the transition. We are actually going to use a thought that many of you are familiar with. Either you have maybe walked with somebody who has gone through the 12-step process, or you've been in that yourself, and there's a great prayer that is prayed called the Serenity Prayer. Are you familiar with that prayer? Some of you know this off by heart. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Some of you are saying that out loud, right? Because this is part of what brings you the ability to cope and overcome. Because look, when you're stressed out, this is the time that you tend to do destructive things. Right? Isn't that true? When you don't know what to do with what's going on inside and your soul's all cramped up inside, we run away to things that aren't good. We complicate things by saying stuff and doing stuff that isn't helpful. We end up in bad patterns, and then we get more stressed because we have consequences. And so there is this need to check ourselves and to say, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now I'm going to reword this for our main idea today, and we'll put this on the screen. Here's the thought: that my stress increases when I attempt to control the uncontrollable. There's limits. There's some things out of my control. When I try to get my arms around those things and manage them, if they're uncontrollable, I'm going to stress myself out. So everybody say this, every location, say with me now: my stress increases when I attempt to control the uncontrollable. Okay, and the opposite is also true, and that's this: my strength returns when I change what I can Okay, we're not encouraging passivity here. Remember, we said last week that uphill hopes require uphill habits. You can't accomplish uphill hopes with downhill habits. So there is something you have to contribute. You've got to do what you can do. You got to take the steps you need to take. You got to get the healthy patterns you need to have so that you can support where you're going. But as you get those habits established, the counterbalance to that is that no matter how hard you work or how much you watch or what you attempt to do in good, sound, wise thinking, you're still going to have a limit. So my strength returns when I change what I can, and I trust God with the rest. So let's say this out loud together. Say it with me. My strength returns when I change what I can, and I trust God with the rest. Okay, now, how do I make that work? So what I love to do whenever I share is I try to take a concept like this and break it down so that you say, okay, I agree with that. I need that. How do I make that work? What are the steps? How do you get down, drilled down into it so where you feel like you've really unclenched your fist, so to speak? What's the thing that has to happen? Okay, let me give you some steps now. First thing you have to identify is, what am I responsible for? Change the things that I can change. Courage to do the stuff I have to do. So what is it that I'm responsible to do? You know, it's kind of an awakening to realize that I really have control over a whole lot less than I think. Isn't it really true? Like, we have this delusion that because we have some level of competence, that our competence or effort is producing more than it actually is. And we forget that everything is really a gift. Like right now, my heart's beating, and I don't have anything to do with that. It's just a gift from God. I'm breathing, and it's working. Isn't that good? That's a gift from God. It's just a gift from God. There's just so much about my life that is a gift. Like, I can see you right now with my eyes. You can see me back probably most in the room, right? Yeah, that's a gift. So just about every part of my life, I'm dependent on God's grace to even function. And if you lose even a speck of your functionality, it doesn't take a lot to realize, God, I just need your help. But we have this illusion of control that we carry. So what am I really responsible for? You know, God, I got a lot going on in my life. What am I really responsible for? There's a couple things I can handle. Number one, I'm responsible for my attitude. The attitude that I choose in response to what's going on will really determine a whole lot. And I can choose my attitude. Now, I can't choose my feelings. Feelings are what they are, but I can choose my responses. So I feel certain things. I feel this was unjust and that hurt and I don't understand. I feel confused, but I can say, I can choose my attitude. I can make it sweet. I can make it positive. I can be filled with faith. That's all choice. I also have the ability to choose my words. I can choose what words come out of my mouth. And my words will steer me. Actually, James says it like this. It's like a rudder to a ship or reins to a horse. What you say will guide your life. You'll aim yourself. Not that you get everything you say, but you're just aiming your life in a good direction. And so sometimes we aim down without knowing it. Like, sometimes I know when I get tired, you probably might be the same. You get tired and stressed, and inside you're all clenched. You start to say stuff to yourself, like in free thought moments, like, I don't know how much of this I can take. You know, this is just terrible. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know, and before you know it, you have just discouraged your own soul by what you've said. Now, I'm not encouraging dishonesty or false positivity where you think, you know, everything's wonderful. No, it's not that kind of thing. But you just simply say, God, I believe you've got grace for me. I don't want to do this anymore, but I know you have a promise for my life. I'm going to get through this. God, I trust you. See, you can aim your words, not just what you say to yourself, but what you say to other people. You know, if you say the wrong thing to other people in reaction to what's going on, you're just going to make it worse. If you've ever sat down and you've typed that angry email, let me just tell you, do not send that. Please don't send that. Like, that's just going to make it way worse. You know what I'm saying? Like, you are responsible for your attitude, for your words. You're responsible to develop your skills. You can grow in areas where maybe you don't know things. You can learn. You're responsible for the opportunities that are in front of you, you know, to be a good steward of what God's placed in your hands. But ultimately, if we could boil it all down to one thing, if you could just boil it down to one word, when we stand before God, God is not going to ask, did you succeed? He's going to ask, did you obey? It isn't, did it work? But did you do what I want? Because look, when we obey God with the best attitude we can muster, it is there that we basically are aiming in his direction to say, God, now you take my obedience and you do what only you can do with what I have offered to you. Okay? So what am I responsible for? You might actually want to sit down and make a list. Here's the things I have control over. Second question then is this. What is God or someone else responsible for? Sometimes we're actually carrying stress because we are actually carrying something we were not intended to carry. We have found ourselves stressed because something is out of control, because it's in someone else's purview. And we're trying to do for them what only they can do, and we are stressed because they aren't responding. Now, let me just describe, okay? There are some times in life when you're in a conflict with somebody, you are trying to help them see your side of it, and they're not seeing it, and you're having that same conversation over and over again, and these things get more and more dysfunctional. Or somebody that you love, that you're watching, walk down a self-destructive path, and you have done what you can do to encourage them and pray for them and give them promises from God and finances and encouragement. You're watching this go down this destructive path, or somebody you work with and they're not performing, and you're trying to, add around them so that they can arrive to their potential, and they're just not getting it. Sometimes we want so bad for the other person to be able to get there that we try to do their job for them. And we over-worry and overwork and we overinvest because we think that if I can just do enough, finally they're going to be convinced that this is the best thing. And then when they're convinced that this is the best thing, it'll all get fixed. And I just want so bad for them to do this that I'm going to do extra, hoping that my extra will get them there. Do you know what they actually call this? There's a word for this. It's called enabling. And enabling doesn't help them because you're actually getting in the way of them feeling the consequence of their lack of ownership. And it doesn't help you because it stresses you out. And it doesn't actually bring you to an answer. And it often gets in God's way of doing what he needs to do in the situation. Don't you wish that God gave us some kind of a gift that you could fast long enough for? And that he would give you some power in the tips of your fingers. And you could look at somebody who wasn't performing. And you could go, and they would instantly change. Oh, wow. Can you imagine that kind of a gift? There's no gift like that. Galatians says there is a fruit of the Spirit called self-control. It isn't spouse control or kid control or in-law control. Doesn't work. No. There is no zapper. Yeah. So it's a powerless feeling because you just want so bad. I mean, you just down to your toes, you want so bad. Oh, if they could just get this. But there's just nothing you can do about it. And so you love and you pray and you encourage, but you have to do it from a healthy place with the right boundaries because, look, if you try to carry for somebody else what they are supposed to carry, you get in God's way and you stress yourself out. And some of you, I believe God brought you here today specifically because you've been stressed out trying to do what somebody else has been designed and given to do. And if you'll just step back and you say, well, what am I supposed to do? Then just watch this happen. I know, isn't it awful? Because there is no answer to that question. I don't have an answer today to what do you do when somebody's not responding. That's an answer. Even God doesn't have an answer for that, because even God doesn't use the zapper for somebody. Like sometimes we pray, can't you just do something here? But he's given each one of us a will, and he works through our will. He doesn't actually force us to conform. And so God with a broken heart looks on, just like we with a broken heart look on. And we work together with God as we pray and we love, but ultimately we just have to stand back and say, oh, God, this is difficult, so I just put this in your hands. You know what I'm talking about? That's one of the most difficult places in life. But it won't help your stress levels to carry someone else's load. So the first problem with carrying someone else's is enabling. There is another problem that we do, and that's when we try to carry God's burden for him. Sometimes we just think God needs a little help, right? Like, God, you're not moving fast enough here. It isn't happening. I think we could probably manage this together a little bit better. And we start to add in things that we were never designed to carry because they're ultimately up to God to do. And so we start to, it's like this. I have been at times the guy when, you're moving and there's all these heavy things that have to be moved. And there's just something, I don't know what it is, wired into some of us guys. There's this really heavy thing. And, you watch, you put your hands underneath and someone says, I'll help you with that if you want. No, I got it. Right? And you're like, you sure you want me to help you? No, I'm fine. You're going to pull your back out and hurt your body, right? And then finally, after you can't, someone says, hey, let me help you. Okay, fine. But we've got nothing to prove. You get your arms underneath the things that God was designed to carry, and you start to carry the stuff that's his job. You know what the recipe is there? It's not enabling. It's exhaustion. You were not designed to carry the responsibility that falls on the shoulders of the Almighty. And some stuff you just can't work hard enough for, and some stuff you can't watch enough for, and sometimes you just don't have enough wisdom for it. And when you reach your limit, you have to say, okay, maybe part of the reason why I'm stressing out is because I've been like, I got this. And what we have to say is, no, God, you got this. It's yours. I surrender, have it, take it. Because the stress you're carrying may be because you're out of your league, you're out of your lane, you're doing stuff that you were never designed to do. Yeah. Okay, here's the third question. Before we get to that, let me just tell you, Psalm 127 has a weird transition in it. You might have forgotten even that we're in this psalm because we've taken a journey away from it for a minute. But remember what we've read. So it's about stress. Unless the Lord builds the house, those that labor in vain. Unless, God watches the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. In vain you get up early to work a little harder and stay up late to worry a little bit more. But God grants rest to those that he loves. It's this whole idea of God, we have limits, but God doesn't. And then all of a sudden, verse 3 transitions. And here's what it says. Psalm 127, verse 3 says, children are a heritage from the Lord. What? I thought we were on stress. How did we get to kids? This was a left turn in verse 3. Like all of a sudden, kids are stress. I get that, right? But this is not what the message. Offspring are a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. By the way, this was always quoted to us when we were having a lot of kids. We have 5. And after we got 4, when Mel said she's pregnant, you're like, oh, you're Psalm 127, verse 4 right there. You got a quiver full. Yes, we do. And then it says they will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. So what happened here? Solomon, I was following you. God grants peace, sleep, rest to those he loves. Children are a reward. They're arrows that are fired into the future. How do these two thoughts have to do with each other? Why are in the same song? Here's what I have come. I've meditated on this long and hard. Here's what I've come up with. You see, sometimes we carry stress because we think that everything is about me and everything's about now. And we are living in the me and now zone. And we're judging life based upon what's happening for me and what's happening right now. And what God is doing is so much bigger and longer than that. And so he wants to not just solve your problems for today, he actually wants to do it in a way that gives you a message that you can carry as a legacy to the next generation. So that the story can be told, not I got through this, God did this for me, but I was in the midst of a stressful circumstance and God's grace was sufficient. And so we pass down a DNA to the next generation and they begin to carry on them what we have experienced in our walk with God. And they then get fired like an arrow into the future because, look, God is about more than just solving your problem for this week. You remember, this stuff you're stressed about today, you won't even remember 2 years from now. And so you got to think this is about a bigger thing. It's not just solving your problems that God's after. He's trying to build you. And he's trying to build your legacy. And so he wants it to be about not just today and not just about you, but about something that will last beyond you. And it's just that your focus has gotten too narrow. And part of your stress is you're not thinking enough about the impact of what your choices today to surrender to God will carry into your future. So, yeah, amen. So here's the third point. That's this. I have to think about what I'm intentionally setting into motion. And honestly, the way God will judge our moment isn't really just in the future generations. It's actually in eternity. Everything you go through today counts for eternity. There's stuff that right now you're stressed over, and you're only thinking about, how do I get through this? You're not thinking, how do I take this and transform it into something that will carry eternal value so that I'll get to heaven one day and I'll say, God, what is that reward over there? And I'll say, well, you remember October 2019? You know, all that stuff you were going through? Well, because you took that and said, God, you got this. And you maintained a good attitude, and you aimed your words well. You obeyed me in where you were. I took that, and I used it, and it became a part of the heritage of your life. And now here's the reward you enjoy. Because sometimes stress lifts just when we get a longer perspective on life. And we choose to intentionally set some things in motion that only God can do. Because look, when you give it over to God, God is not just interested in you surviving, okay? Can I just say this? Sometimes we think, okay, yes, giving God my stress is a better survival mechanism than if I carry it myself. True, but God is not trying to help you survive. When you give it to God, God isn't like, okay, let me carry this and let's just bear down and try to make it till Friday. No, God, this is not God's mindset. When you give it to God, God takes it and he brings breakthrough with it. God takes it and he blows it up into something you could never have imagined. God takes it and he brings things into your life that are answers to prayer. And you step back and not just say, oh, I barely made it through that, but you say, look at what God did. I didn't know where this was going to come from, and I was at the end of my rope, and I gave it over to God. And God, in his time and wisdom, brought to pass something I could have never done for myself. See, when God steps in, he's just not trying to help you survive. He's trying to help take you to a whole nother level. And we forget because we just think in too many incremental perspectives. Can you just turn your face toward heaven wherever you are? Let's just close in prayer. God, help us. We just need help. So often, I confess, my inner response is to try to carry things that I should not be carrying. I know there are many hearing me right now. They're in the same space. Help us, God. We just say to you, you got this, God. Put it in your hands. We choose to receive your grace because when we open our hearts to you and our heart, soul unclenches, there's grace that flows in. I just pray for the flow of your grace in the name of Jesus. Now, I just, still with your eyes closed, just focused for a moment. I talked a moment about eternity. You know, the Bible says that when you die here on earth, you don't cease to exist. The question becomes, do you exist in the presence of God or not? And God did what you couldn't do for yourself. Jesus came to be a man. He walked amongst us. He lived a sinless life. He died on the cross to pay for what we could never pay for, our past sin. And then he rose from the grave, and he defeated death, and he gives to us that same capacity to have life on the inside that's eternal. But you have to make a decision to trust him, to say, God, you got this with my life, my sin, my past. I need you to forgive me. I want you to enter my life and do what only you can do in my soul. Here's what I want to ask you to do. If you're not sure that you're right with God today, or you need to come back to him, or maybe you have been thinking about this and this is your moment to cross the line of faith and to give your life to Jesus, I just want to ask you to get your right hand ready. I'm going to count to 3, and in every campus, when you hear that number 3, I want you to throw your hand in the air. If that's you, you want to make that decision to trust Jesus with your life. And then we're going to pray together as a group. Okay, so get your right hand ready on the number 3. 1, 2, 3. Just shoot your hand up. Say, that's me. Yeah, just keep it up. Can you just right now join me? Everybody who's hearing me now, say this out loud. Say, Jesus, I thank you that you believed in me enough to die in my place. You shed your blood on that cross so I could be forgiven. Forgive me now. Wash away my past. Make me right with God. For I open my heart to you. I place my soul in your hands. And I believe, just as you rose from the dead, you can give life to me. I receive that life today. In Jesus' name, amen. That's awesome.